Mine damer og herrer, ta vel imot Thomas B. Johansson.
Good afternoon. Great pleasure to be here to talk about what I consider one of the more difficult and important aspects of dealing with the climate issue. This, of course, has been talked about for a very long time, as long as we've been talking about climate change. But the emphasis has been in solving the other areas where greenhouse gases originate, and the transport sector has been considered the more difficult one. And so has been the discussion also in Sweden. And it changed in 2009 when the Swedish government put a bill forward to Parliament with a vision of a sustainable and resource-efficient energy system without net emissions by 2050. And also stated that as a step in this direction, the vehicle fleet should be independent of fossil fuels. Now, to do this, nothing happened until the summer of 2012 when the government appointed me as commissioner to find out how to go about this. So with the help of more than 100 experts, a report was produced, and what I will tell you is basically taken from that. We explored a broad set of issues and not limiting this to sort of how do you replace the vehicles and their fuels, where you can have different solutions. And of course, the solutions you're working on with some preference here in Norway is the electric one, which is fine when you have an energy system, a power system, which is free from greenhouse gases. That is not the case in Europe at large, or most of the world. We have almost that situation in Sweden, so that's fine. So we looked with a broader ambition to see what can you do to affect this situation. And what happens is that we identify a set of trends that are of interest and work in this direction. Like, for example, we have a lot of interest in travel-free meeting, IT technology. We are sometimes envisioning a peak car developing. And we looked at 5 areas where, in addition to trends, we could see possibilities for improvement. That is, stimulate continuous societal transformation towards reduced and more efficient transport. This includes such things as putting emphasis on urbanization that leads to less transport, infrastructure investments, for example, enhancement of the railway system, use more of coastal water transport. We have more energy-efficient vehicles of all kind. And as you can see, these 3 areas are all examples of efficiency improvements, which is always the most important aspect to focus on when you want to transform energy systems. We looked at electric transportation, and we looked at biofuels. For each one of these categories, we said, all right, how much can we reduce fossil fuel use from 2010 if we do everything we can think of in each of these 5 areas, and we are very successful? Then we come to this situation, and that little green thing probably doesn't work, but in 2010, we had around 75 terawatt hours of fossil fuels and a little biofuel. By 2030 and 2050, the top of the bars indicate the fuel use that would be there if the prognosis for the Swedish societies was realized. Then we reduce that fuel use by the measures I indicated, and you can see that the largest reduction comes through more efficient vehicles, while the infrastructure investments and the urbanization guidance take on a larger role by 2050. You can also see that by 2030, we don't manage, even if we're very successful on everything, to take away all of the fossil fuels. We said about 90% if you're really successful, and that's very unlikely to be. By 2050, we can even export, as you see, quite a bit of biofuels, and we still have biofuels in abundance in society. The electrification doesn't come out clearly, but this graph shows that by 2040, it's all going to be electric or biofuel driven. Biofuels need support to happen. We proposed a quota system and we proposed a framework to get new biofuels onto the market from new sources. We don't use anything close to the Swedish bioenergy potential, which also includes about 200 terawatt hours per year of additional not used growth in the forest. This is how we envisioned the development of emissions. And you can see, and then going down to we put 80% reduction by 2030 as a realistic but very ambitious target. We put in control stations to follow what is actually happening and see how we can adjust where we're going. We pointed to the possibility of systematically exploring synergies. The Swedish industry have a lot of capacity, like the Norwegian, and can contribute and benefit from climate mitigation efforts. We have that both for fuels and for vehicles, and this is an opportunity to make more efforts than just reducing climate, and this is of course very desirable. If we then return to a larger picture to see what would this involve if the Swedish society actually put an emphasis on developing in this direction. We would not only reduce emissions, we would get a more secure energy supply system. There would be more jobs in Sweden. Many of them could not be moved out of Sweden, associated with bioenergy in particular. Accessibility in cities would improve. The mobility emphasis is in that direction. Reduced emissions of air pollutants and noise is very desirable and needs to be pushed anyway. Increased physical activity and health through more walking-friendly and bicycle-friendly cities. Better basis for public transport, which is, of course, one of the big issues to push for, and reduced land requirement for transport. So with all of those benefits, one could say this should happen anyway, irrespective of the climate issue. And these multiple benefits, at least in the Swedish context, receive far too little attention in the discussions that we have. And another few improvements that I will not elaborate on. Thank you.